Welcome to the Movement Upgraded podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jen Hosler, licensed physical therapist and certified strength and mobility coach. Here you can expect to hear about all things movement. The Movement Upgraded podcast is a blend of the science of strength training, rehab, and mobility, mixed with a personal and professional experience to provide you with the steps you need to keep your body pain-free and moving well, so you can do what you love forever. Welcome back to the Movement Upgraded podcast. I have another guest today that I'm super excited to bring on. We have Dr. Emily here. I've been friends with her for like a couple years now, Emily?
Yeah, it goes by too fast.
I know. Especially with the pandemic, it just completely alters my perception of time.
Same.
But I met Emily via social media. We kind of communicated a lot based off of, we have a lot of similar treatment approaches, and a lot of what we do is very similar, actually, because she's a hybrid rehab clinician. So she's actually a chiropractor. Yes, I'm bringing another chiropractor on here. I've had two chiros come on before any other PTs, so we can get along. But Emily specifically works with pole dancers, and she is really great at specializing in that, because I know the requirements for bodies and movements for pole dancers is very specific. So Emily, kind of tell me a little bit about how you got into this specific niche of work.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to talk with you. The last time we recorded a podcast, it was like over 2 hours. So I am like buckled up for today. It was super long. Yeah. So the dog is chilling. I had a snack. I'm ready to chat forever. So I got into the pole dancer niche, I don't want to say kind of on accident, but kind of not. So I've been pole dancing for 5 years now, and I started when I was in chiropractic school. And while I was new to, I'm going to call it a sport, other people will call it an art, I was learning stuff about the body, about movement, about rehab, while I was going to classes. And at first it was just kind of I have my school world and I have my pole world, and there's not anything linking them together. They were very intentionally kept separate because I wanted a space where I could just go move and not be expected to answer questions about the body and all of the fun things that come when people are oh, you do that? My elbow hurts. What about it? But I realized that a lot of the cueing and the way that our classes were structured and just kind of the overall culture, there was a huge disconnect between movement science and what was being taught in the studio. And I had some mild injuries, I would say. I would go to the student clinic and chat with my intern about it. And I was really struggling to help my intern understand what I was doing in class, and therefore what I needed to have treated and how to treat it. So just honestly all sorts of disconnect. And then I remember very distinctly one day I was walking down the hall, and our school was really old, and so it was kind of dim, and I was I could bridge all of this together. I could be the person that takes the movement science rehab world and connects it to pole studios so that pole dancers aren't just on aches and pains. Well, even on up, there's people that do some pretty catastrophic stuff to their body because it's pretty dynamic and you're hanging upside down by a toe at some point. And at first it was just this blimp of an idea, right? And I was oh, I could do that. And then honestly, I went to Instagram because why wouldn't I go to Instagram? And I realized that there were a few people in Australia that were already doing it. And part of that made me excited, but then also I was fuck, other people are already doing it. So what makes me think that I can do it too? And so I kind of,
you're oh, there's two other people in the world doing this. I can't do it.
I can't do it. Yeah.
So it's annoying how our brains do that. I relate to that.
Yes. And so I had a moment of I don't know, am I worthy enough to do this? Am I worthy enough to put myself in this space? And it was something where I'm maybe, I'm just gonna kind of let that fester in the background. I still had, oh gosh, a year and a half left of school. So was just kind of chilling with it. And it wasn't until I graduated and I actually towards the end of graduation, I realized that there were performing arts specialists. Like I took a continuing education class with the circus doc. Her name's Emily Sherb. She's a PT out of Seattle, where she travels around and teaches people how to like assess and treat aerial athletes, aerial artists. And I was like, oh, like there's like a whole other kind of genre to the movement rehab world where they're just focused on like these types of athletes. And from there, I was like, oh, like I'm going to have my specialty be like just performing artists and like dancers, gymnasts, like that whole realm of the world. And that went well. Like that helped my brain be like, okay, instead of just doing pole dancers, like there's a lot, right? Yeah. Like that, I was able to like kind of check out of that scarcity mindset a little bit. And then this is kind of a long story, sorry, but then I started working. I
think it's interesting.
Okay. So I graduated, started working for a doctor in my hometown in Montana. It's a pretty small town. It's like a ranching community. There's a lot of elderly people that will choose to retire in that part of Montana because it's really beautiful. And I went in with this business plan, like in my brain, like I'm going to specialize in like performing artists. There was a pretty large like aerial community, like 45 minutes away. So I'm like, I'm going to become like the go-to person in this area of Montana, which is where I wanted to live. But it's going to be great. Well, the doctor that I was working for did not think it was going to be great. Was not super on board with, I really don't understand why. I think probably just like the stigma of pole dancing. And
that's what I was going to ask. Yeah. Because that's common.
Yes.
In the like quote unquote professional world, like that's
yes.
not quote unquote professional, which what is professional?
What is professional? Yeah. We were into, I think that was actually one of our first conversations is what is considered professional.
Yeah.
And so it was a really hard time because the person that I was working for at the time, I would have considered a really good friend, and being told that my like dream for my career wasn't going to happen if I worked for them. Like I needed to focus more on helping like Medicare patients. And for some reason, she really wanted me to be involved in the fly fishing community. And I don't fish. I am not an outdoorsy person. Like I am so sorry. I will go outside like to walk my dog and like maybe go for a run. Like that is it. I am not doing, there's bugs, there's dirt. Like it's pretty, but like, no, thank you. So
one of those hobbies you will probably not see me doing either. It's just like, I would just rather spend my time doing almost anything else.
Yes. Well, and especially like fly fishing too, because you just have to stand there and like flick your wrist for freaking ever. And it's a skill. It was, yeah, there was like multiple conversations where she's like, I want you to be involved in like the fly fishing community. And I think she was trying to like, they have a lot of like wrist and shoulder, elbow things going on. And I like the shoulder. So I think she was just trying to find a more, like what you said, like quote unquote professional sport for me to be involved in. And I was like, dude, like, no, I'm so sorry. No. And so I had a moment, while I was working with her where I was like, I'm just going to have to let this dream die. Like, it's just going to have to be, it was a cool idea, but it's not, not going to happen. And then the pandemic happened. And then the world, as we know it, just like honestly fell apart. So my husband and I decided that we were going to move. So we moved to Boise, Idaho, which is where we live now. And I was like, okay, I don't really want to work for someone else. Like, I don't want to deal with someone telling me that the hobby that I really enjoy isn't professional and that I need to hide it from people and private my Instagram and like a whole bunch of stuff with that. So I was like, if I'm going to go out on my own and I'm going to like bet on myself, I'm going to go after what I want to do. And that was to work with pole dancers and be able to bridge the gap like I was talking about earlier. So when I set up my practice here in Idaho for the first, 6 months, I actually practiced out of the back of a pole studio, which was super interesting. And then from there, realized that if I wanted to have the impact that I want to have on the world and on the pole community, I can't just work with people in person. So I started working with people online. And now I would say at least 80% of my income and the people that I treat are online, and 20% is in person, which is not what I had originally anticipated, but it's been really fun.
I was just talking to somebody last weekend, one of my good friends and colleagues, about how like funny it is that our conversation as like clinicians is so much social media now. And it's like, we were talking about TikTok versus YouTube and all these things, and like recording and scheduling time for creation and like content. And it's just like so fascinating, because when I thought about becoming a physical therapist, none of that was like, that wasn't an option. That wasn't considered. It wasn't something we learned. Like, so not only did we do all of this learning for like 7 years and beyond, and then now we're like learning a whole nother profession with our profession. It's like very fascinating. And sometimes I have to take a step back and realize like, holy cow, Jen, like there's a lot of stuff you're learning, because that's just kind of the way it is. And I think it's really cool that we get to do that. Like, I honestly think the ability to work with people all across the world and like reach more people is amazing for the ability to reach more people. Because I'm sure we're going to talk about this, but there are repeated things that you see over and over in the clinic, and you're just like hitting your head against a wall, because you're like, I'm not doing enough. Like, we need to change this. And then it's like, okay, well, what are some other ways I can have more of an effect of change, even if it's just a small bit more compared to the actual world? And social media is like really helpful in allowing us to do that. And I just think it's so cool to do that. And then the ability to give you a little bit more freedom in your ability to make your life a little bit more sustainable for treatment. Because also clinicians don't last in the profession very long, which is something I didn't know when I was going through PT school. So it's pretty cool that, we're able to do this. And then I'm so glad that I have found you and other clinicians who do that, because nobody else understands all of the moving parts when you're doing both things. So I'm glad that you have found a like niche and a way of doing things that make this seem and feel like something that's like exciting for you. Because just like fitness, it's just like careers, you have to find something that's interesting and like that you enjoy. Otherwise, like, what are you doing? Because there's always parts of stuff that are not necessarily the best things to deal with, or there's like negative sides. And so as long as you have something that's like, oh no, but I love doing this, then it's a little bit more sustainable for you. So I love seeing people in their element. And I just feel like I could tell that since you've switched into this like niche and doing all of that, that you are like, there's just a different change in your persona versus like when you were first starting and you were just talking to me, and like how you converse about those things is entirely different. And I just think it's really cool. And I'm glad that you went for it, despite somebody telling you that's never going to happen. So
honestly, same. And I would say like reflecting on even just since I started my practice in September of 2020, which like 0 out of 10 recommend moving to a new state and deciding to start a practice in the middle of a pandemic. It was intriguing, but just the difference, even, you know, like when I would have like one person a week, like when I first started, and I was so excited because I knew that they were doing the same things that I was doing. Like I knew that they were going to be a pole dancer, that they were going to be having some sort of something that was impacting their ability to pole, and that I could help them with that. Versus the people that I was treating at the first clinic that I worked at would be like, which like no shade if you enjoy treating people that are like in severe pain or that are in like the Medicare age, but they don't tend to want to move. They just want to like lay on the table and have me like quote unquote fix them. And that's not how I operate or really how I want to practice. And so it was a lot of like soul draining work.
It's a like different type of energy required to do that work. It's not mine either.
And I don't know. And honestly, like when I first started posting on, it was like when the pandemic first started that I started posting like more pole specific stuff, just because I was like not working very many hours. And then was just like bored out of my mind at home. My husband works out of town. So I was like, if I'm going to be stuck at home for like the majority of the day, unable to like literally go anywhere, I'm going to just make content and put it out there. But yeah, that was kind of how I found joy at the beginning. And then the more that the pandemic like kind of drug on, I was like, if this is my like going to be my work life where I go in and I'm only seeing people that I like have that like, oh, okay, we can make it through the next 15 minutes in this room, and then I can have a moment to like recenter myself, and then like the next same where you're just like, you can make it through. Like if that's my entire life, I'm not going to stay in this profession. Like I'm going to get burnt out. I'm going to be super depressed. And like, why did I spend 8 years of my life in school if I'm just like dreading going to work every day? So,
and then you're not helping like the people that you could potentially help too. Like, that's what I think is like so hard, and was hard for me at first, because I felt like guilty and selfish about like being like, no, I have a certain population that I really like working with. And then I was like, well, but all these other people like need my help or something along those lines. But like, if you find a population that you really like working with, then you can do things longer and like actually help people, which is like the whole point of why we did our profession. Right. So
yes,
it's just a very interesting thing. And there's some like, I don't know, not culture, but like some surrounding notions, ideas in the culture of being a professional and a healthcare provider of like self-sacrifice and stuff like that, when it's just like, oh no, because we can actually make sure that we are helping people that we enjoy and enjoy things that are in our job. And that in and of itself helps us be able to help more people, which is like really the whole point.
Definitely. Yeah. And it's something where like, I'm not trying to make a martyr out of myself by any means for my profession. And there are a lot of communities that like really do need more help. And to be honest, like those are areas where I am more than happy to like volunteer my time on like a somewhat regular basis. But if I am going to go in and like really truly make this be a career that I want for myself, I'm going to pick the people that I want to work with that are going to like, bring me joy, and I can help them better. So that's bold answers for me.
I know. I love it. So tell me, I know that you have a program that you launched. Did you launch that last year? Or was that?
When did I was actually trying to find the date, because I was like, I should put that on my calendar to see how long it's been. So the first time I tried to launch it would have been when I first moved to Boise. So I moved here in August, and it was like Black Friday that I tried to get just local people to sign up for it. So I call it my pole performance program. Mostly, I'll be honest with you, I'm creative, but I'm not the most creative when it comes to some stuff. And I was like, I don't know what to call it. Like, I'll just call it this. And then it's stuck. And that was an utter failure. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I actually had because I like mailed the flyer or emailed the flyer to the local studios, and was just like, I'd already introduced myself prior, but I'm like, hey, I'm here, I'm running this special. And I had one of the studio owners write me back like the nastiest email about how like it was super unprofessional for me to ask them to put up a flyer in their business promoting my business. And I was like, well, okay, like it's going to help your clients like be able to stay like healthier and like be able to pay you more for longer, but whatever. It was
dealing with humans sometimes.
It is, yeah. And so I like that was a big like wake up call for me, because I wasn't expecting it to be like all of a sudden like $1 million idea, don't get me wrong, but to hear that I went about it in a way that like really triggered a lady, I was like, oh, I need to like re-examine how I'm doing this. So I hired a business coach, went through a really intense oh gosh, how long was that program? Like 14-week program about like how to market and promote, create content on social media.
Things that we didn't learn in school that we're learning about business. It's like,
yes,
we're learning marketing and we're learning social media. Now we're learning business. And it's like, wait, I just wanted to be a clinician. I don't understand, but I appreciate that because I like learning stuff. So
it turns out there's a lot more that goes into just letting people know that you exist as a clinician and like how you can help them. Like there's a lot of nuance that happens with it, and there are ways that just like psychology wise that humans tend to respond better than others. And like I didn't know that. I was just like, hey, I'm here, I have this skill set, like let me help you.
That's like, and like side, I'm the same. Like, why do I have to convince them that they need this? Like I just it's here, like you just probably need it, and they're like, that's not going to work.
That's not going to work. No. Yes, why? So then my like second relaunch of the program was January, probably like March of last year. So we're like a little over a year into it. It's been honestly really awesome because I have worked with people, like I have a person in Japan, I have a bunch of people in Europe. I have a bunch of people all across the United States, which is super cool. I keep trying to get people in South America and Africa to sign up, but currency exchange is kind of pain when it comes to that. But yeah, so I'm like working on spreading out throughout the entire globe, which is really cool. I have people from like, they just started pole dancing. They're like, you've been posting about how this like fucks up our bodies. I don't want to have my body be fucked up, to like national champion. Like one of the people was like the German national champion for an artistic piece. That's so like cool. A wide range of artists, which was super fun to work with.
So tell me like about the program. Like what is the purpose of it, and like what kind of does it consist of?
Yeah, so I feel like it kind of had like two tracks within it. The track that tends to be more popular is a pole dancer that is having some sort of discomfort, ache, pain, injury going on, that they either don't feel comfortable going and talking to providers locally because they feel like they're going to be judged for being a pole dancer, or they've kind of exhausted their options for providers locally, where they're like, hey, some of the people that I've talked to, I've seen like 3-4 plus providers of like all different types, trying to figure out what's going on with it's usually the shoulder, to be honest, or hip, that they're like, something's not right, but they keep telling me that I'm fine and I'm not fine. Like I can't do the stuff that I want to do.
There's just a huge disconnect for providers and anybody who's active. Like,
yes,
because the same people, not pole dancers, but the same type of active person usually is the one who sees me. They've been seeing multiple providers. Like I just saw somebody who's been in therapy for like, I think most of her life. And like I think she's 40. So by the time she's seen me, she's seen so many, and she's just like, well, this is the opposite of every provider, everything every provider has ever told me, or like all the stuff that you say is not necessarily the thing to do, is like all I've been doing. So I feel like that is probably even highlighted even more so in pole, especially because most providers don't even know what it is. And so if they're not even trying to figure that out, like I don't feel like they're going to be able to help the people that you work with. And that's probably a big reason why you're like, no, I need to do this.
Yes. And so it's been really interesting because like, well, people will reach out to me and they'll have like very specific things like, hey, my shoulder hurts when I'm transitioning from an iguana into a handspring. And most providers are going to be like, the fuck does that mean? Like, like what do you
gymnastics wise, but it's probably not the same.
No, it's in full. So yeah, just being able to like, that's probably the most common thing that I hear is like people will say like very specific pole terms, like, hey, it's hurting what I'm doing, whatever. Iguana is one trick, handsprings another one. And immediately I'm like, okay, which arm? Top arm, bottom arm? Like, it doesn't matter like which way you're twisting. Like, they don't have to start with like, here's an iguana.
Yeah.
Like, here's
I've had some athletes who come to me and they're like, I do this sport. And I'm like, I don't know anything about that. But like, I, as a clinician, will go research, but that's because I have my practice set up where I can spend time. Okay, now let me go look at what is going on and what your sport is and all those things. Because the way that I work, I usually am like, let me see what your shoulder is doing and capable of before I even look at your sport, because I need to make you like, I need to have a good shoulder before I even try to specialize it into the sport. That's just like how I treat. So I would start that way, get an idea of their shoulder, start working on it. And then I'm going to be like, okay, now I need to figure out where we're going with this shoulder. So up. And like, I've spent quite a bit of time looking at things because you have to, like, I have a college swimmer that I'm working with and I don't know anything about swimming. So like, I, to an extent, will work on that. And if I feel like I'm like, okay, I can only help you so much, then normally I would just send them to somebody who specializes in that. So like if I get a pole dancer, probably going to send them to you.
Oh, thank you.
So, but like, that's also because you just already know those things. So why not send somebody to someone who already works with people who do that? It's just like a very interesting concept. And that's like a whole different story. But I do feel like it's always helpful from a patient perspective to know that the provider you're seeing understands and speaks your language. And even like the fact that you do pole dancing, like they're like, okay, so she's going to get it. And there's like a huge amount of trust there. And like trust is really important in a relationship with patients and clients. So I think it's really cool that you're doing that. And then I think your program is probably super helpful for so many people because they're like, I don't have any access to anybody. I've gone through all of it. And you're like, solution. I have a solution.
Yes, I have a solution. Yeah. And I think because like, honestly, the same, like I work with people in person occasionally. They'll find my office and they're not a pole dancer. And I'll be very like upfront with them to be like, you know, like when you walk into my office, you're going to see a pole in the middle of my space. Like this is the patient population that I specialize in, but like most likely I can't help you. I don't know until I see you, but I will take the time to like get to know people, get to know what they want to be able to do, where their body's at currently, kind of where do we need to fill the gaps. And I don't feel like that happens very often. And I don't know if it just doesn't happen very often in general, or if it just is highlighted more because a lot of people have like pretty firm beliefs about pole dancing. Like they have like what it is in their brain, and they're not really willing to like step outside of that and just like let their biases go and help the person in front of them. So it's an issue. And then honestly, it's really heartbreaking. There's lots of tears that have happened on my like consult calls of people being super frustrated and being able to say like, you know, obviously I can't tell the future, but like, I will help you and I'm not going to judge you for what you have going on. So
I feel like that would be so hard. And that probably is so common in pole, like just to feel safe telling your provider, this is what I do, without being judged or feel like some sort of like shame towards it. It's like, and I know that probably happens with providers because I watched it, not with pole dancers, of course, but like I've watched providers like it's hard. First of all, it's hard to be a provider, right? Like it's hard to know how to check your biases out. And you basically have to become Dr. Emily. Dr. Emily and other Emily are like two different people. And sometimes like, I think one of the big reasons that we created our practices the way we are is so they're not so vastly different. I get really worn out trying to be like this specific Dr. Jen that like other offices wanted me to be. I'm like, I can't do that. So the ability to be yourself a little bit is important, but being able to know that like you have to check your biases out. It doesn't matter what your thoughts are about what they do or what their goals are to an extent, as long as they're not harming themselves, right? Because your goal is to make sure that they're keeping themselves safe. But like, other than that, your goal, your purpose, and the whole point of everything is to make sure that you take care of the person in front of you. And too many providers probably need to go to therapy.
Yes.
Honest, if I can just it, like they probably just need to go to therapy and like learn how to not put their own issues in the forefront of their treatment. And so it makes me sad that people deal with that a lot. I just talked to somebody who she's got a lot of pain, a lot of things going on in her body. And it's very obvious that we have a lot of sympathetic nervous system stuff. So we spent 40 minutes of her hour assessment talking, and I explained pain science to her and a lot of stuff. And I just don't think when providers ever sit down and talk with somebody to figure that out, or are able to because of insurances and stuff like that. But anyways, I'm just really glad that you get to provide that for people, because I see it also. And it's just probably, it's like I think the number one thing that I see is people leaving the assessment being like, oh, I have hope again. And probably that's something you hear a lot too.
Yes.
And you're just like, oh, I'm so sorry that was like not there for so long, but I'm glad to offer that for you. So tell me about, so it sounds like you treat a lot of shoulders, like shoulder is kind of the predominant. I've heard a lot of wrist issues as well. So would you say like shoulders are like the number one thing in pole dancers that become problematic?
Yeah, I would say shoulders for sure. And then like high hamstring, kind of hip.
That's a common yoga thing too. It's just probably like bendy people.
Yes. And like there's
stretch.
A lot of splitty, a lot of hip movements. And then I would say it probably would be a toss up of like wrist, elbow, or like ankle, depending, because like a lot of people dance in like 8+ inch heels, and like it only takes one time of you eating shit in an 8-inch heel for your ankle to like not feel super great. And then depending upon your style of pole dancing, because there's a lot of different styles, it can be a lot of like a push-up position on the floor repetitively. And like most people train for like an hour at least at a time. So like imagine doing a push-up for an hour and like their wrists like don't love that, especially if they don't have.
I walk on my hands as a gymnast like all the time. Like I did handstand pirouettes. Like that was like I was terrible. I still am. I'm like working right now and rebuilding my handstands because like I was able to do handstands very well because I'm really good at compensating and like getting strong, but like at the expense of all of my joints. And I had chronic wrist issues and like a ganglion cyst for a while because of it. And now I'm like, oh, now I know all of the reasons why. So like being on your wrist for an hour is a lot.
Yeah.
Kind of intense. So I feel like in rehab, there's like definite repeated things that I'm going over and over with my clients. And I'm sure that you have this too. So like, I feel like I'm constantly having to educate women about protein. That's like a big thing, or like educating people about stress management, or, hey, let's talk about load management. Do you feel like the culture of like pole dancing has any sort of things that they reinforce that you're like constantly trying to undo? Or do you not see super consistent patterns with that?
Yeah, there's definitely a pattern. So, I would say the most common thing that happens, like the traditional like pole dancer journey, let's say. So you'll start usually doing like a class or two, depending upon the studio that you're at. They might just have like a drop-in class. So some of them will do like a 3-class pack for a discount or whatever. So people will go, and it's unlike anything that they've ever done before. And even if you have had an athletic background or even a gymnast or dancer background, it's still slightly different. But a lot of it's primarily, I can talk, women that pole dance. There are men that do, and then our non-binary community as well, that they have not exercised for years of their life. Like they didn't enjoy sports, like traditional sports. They didn't really enjoy anything. And then they found pole and they are in love. There's the sexy element. There's the like graceful element. You can spin, you can go upside down. You can wear like cute fucking outfits, including,
interesting. Like it's probably one of the ways to like keep yourself entertained as you're doing things.
Yes.
It's like an art, which I feel like there's like that creative aspect that people, especially adults, are just like
missing.
We like don't know how to be creative or whatever. And so it probably taps into that for people, and they're just like, oh, this is amazing. It's like filling so many gaps for them.
Yeah, it's like so many. There's like the community is amazing. And so there's like all these things that they're like, yes, like I found a thing. Like as an adult, I found a movement that I like. It's challenging. Like you can go from like just walking around the pole to like literally doing flips. So like anywhere in between, whatever you like to do. So they become like obsessed. And so they haven't worked out for years, like sometimes decades, and they will start taking 7 classes a week.
Oh, no.
Like it's like literally like 0 to 1,000. And as anyone that knows anything about the body, hopefully, like the body doesn't respond like that. Like you literally can't just decide one day you're going to go run a marathon. And most people wouldn't, but they will start doing some sort of activity, and they're like, oh, I like this, so I'm going to do it every day and like try like max effort every single class to try and get better. And the body says, excuse me, no, I do not like this. Yeah. And whether that happens like right away, within like the first few months, or it'll happen, I would say usually like year 2 to 3, and then it like kind of dips down and it's like 5 to 7, and then like 10. Like there seems to be like milestones, where like if they haven't been like addressing like cross training their mobility, their flexibility, strength kind of stuff, that their body's going to be like, we're trying to hold on, and like we can't anymore.
It sneaks up on you and catches up to you, and you're just like, oh yeah, it was when I turned my head this one way, and you're just like, oh, it's literally the years or decades of you not doing all of these other things and managing all of that. So definitely sounds like a load management problem.
Yes, a load management problem, a recovery problem, like all of the lifestyle things that we don't think impact our ability to perform, like all of those play a huge role. Diet culture is huge in just our society in general. And then most people choose to pole dance in very minimal clothing because we need our skin to stick onto the pole. So you're in like a bikini, and if you are self-conscious at all, like, you're gonna diet to try and make yourself be smaller. So you're like, it's just kind of this like giant like shit storm of things. So
like a lot of a lot of factors adding together to create some issues.
Yes.
Sure. Like if you're, and this is something we just talked about in the podcast that I did with Steph last week, but if you're an active woman, you need to eat enough and not be chronically dieting and giving your body enough to support your goals, and specifically enough protein, because we talk about that a lot in proteins, like your building blocks for all of your connective tissues and your muscles, ligaments, like all of them. And if you, like when we're exercising, you are breaking those down. So it doesn't matter if you're doing pull or you're lifting or you're just like active in whatever you do, like you have some breakdown of the tissues. And if you are not fueling it to build up or giving yourself the rest, because sleep and rest when we're not lifting or working out or doing pull is when we make those changes, then you're definitely going to run into injuries. So, and I feel like that added layer of like wearing minimal clothing already just like takes diet culture and lights it on fire. Probably for a lot of women. So it's definitely, I can see how that can be problematic, but a lot of people don't link the whole like not eating enough to an injury. Like they don't see that, at least the people that I work with. So I'm sure you might have to talk about that a little bit too with your clients.
Yeah, and I do, and it's a tricky, there's actually one person that's coming to mind where like she was really struggling to feel better, to have enough energy to do things. And we started chatting about diet. And I'll be honest with you, diet is not something that I love talking to people about because it's like, it's super personal. I had an eating disorder for a significant portion of my life. And so as better as I'm doing with it, like I don't really love having people tell me about how they're like super restricting their calories. It can be just like too much for me still. So I'm like, it's like this delicate dance of me being like, I need to have this conversation with you, but I also need to like not like trigger myself to do like me to go into a bad place. But yeah, so we were talking and she's like, I eat 1,200 calories a day, and she trains with me 3 days a week and then instructs classes and takes classes. So she's pretty active, I would say, the majority of the week. And I'm like, honey, 1,200 calories is like not going to be enough. Like, I'm so sorry. You need to eat more. And so I had her do a like how many calories should I eat for my activity level calculation. And I thought she was going to kill me, like not like actually kill me, but she was like so mad. She was like, there's no fucking way I'm eating this much every day. Like there's absolutely no way. And I was just like, okay, you know, like it's data, like here's the information, you know, like you're in charge of your body. You can do what you want to do. And I was like, I don't feel like it's super sustainable for you to jump. Cause I think it was like almost double the amount of calories that she needed.
Like that. And Steph talked about that in the podcast too. She's like, usually we'll start with like, let's add 100 to 200 calories. Just like, imagine if you're like in such a deficit, even a little bit more will make you feel better. I think some people look at the like bigger number and they're like, there's no way. Like,
yes.
Like, yes. And so it just doesn't seem attainable. And you're just like, nah, you probably will feel better if you just eat a little bit more and then like see how you feel. And most
go from there.
At least the ones that I've worked with are the same, not the same, but like similar. And then they start to eat a little more. They're like, oh, so I'm suddenly not having sugar cravings. And that's amazing. I'm actually motivated to train. I'm like, oh yeah, like your body actually wants to move when you feel it. It's like a novel idea. You don't like link those things. And sometimes that low motivation is like, maybe I just didn't eat enough. And
yeah,
I'm constantly like reparenting myself with that. Like I just did that this morning. I was so annoyed at myself before this conversation. I like tried to get my workout in and I knew I didn't eat enough today. And I definitely didn't eat enough yesterday. And so my blood sugar was like, no way. And so then I was just like, great, here's this lesson again. So
yeah, so like once again, where this story gets really interesting is we had agreed that she was going to try eating like 300 calories more a day, and we were going to do like a 4-week trial at that calorie amount, and then depending upon how she feels, like she can make the decision on what she wanted to do. Well, she gained a little bit of weight and immediately was like, no, like none. And I was like, okay, well, it's like you want your cake and eat it too. Like you want to feel better, but you're not willing to do what you need to feel better. And like, that's where I think the diet culture part, like really just like fucks women, where it's like, she's not going to feel good. She's not going to perform very well because she is like so scared of having to buy the next size up of pants. Or like having a little bit of a belly. Yeah.
Like, I hate it so much. Cause like I went through like I've been through terrible body image struggles, like when I was younger, and I know the feeling and the struggle. Like I just tried to go buy new jeans at Old Navy yesterday and I'm like sweating in the whatever the place, and like I brought the stretchiest jeans in the fitting room. They still like, I couldn't get them over my legs. It's just like so annoying that it has so much emotional attachment to it. And you can just not be like, okay, these don't fit because my legs are bigger. Moving on.
Yeah, like there's nothing wrong with you. There's like the pants just aren't the right size, right?
Or like, yeah, or like going up a size. Yeah, okay, maybe my body needed to like go up a size to be able to do the things that I want to do without like combating all of the other things. And like, I think it's hard for women too, because we're just told that we should never get bigger and blah, 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 like all that stuff. And then we wear tighter clothes. So like, we definitely can notice things a little bit more. It's just such a clusterfuck of mental things that just, they take so much energy from us. It drives me crazy. So
they do. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's an interesting, like, that is something that I'd have to like delicately try to address when I'm working with people is like, yeah, lifestyle, diet is one of them. Stress is another one. Load management is huge. And people don't like to be told that they shouldn't train as much as they want to train. So a lot of like, more is not better, better is better.
Yes.
Kind of conversations. Yeah. They don't always go well, which is really interesting.
It's hard to know sometimes and to gauge where people are at and whether or not they're prepared or ready to receive the information that they need. And on the list of things I didn't realize I was going to be doing as a clinician is the amount of coaching involved. And just like, that is literally what a clinician is. It's a coach with like a medical degree, in my opinion. Yeah. And so like, I just never thought about how much fun, intricate dancing we would be doing with making sure that we're like validating them, seeing where they're at, but also being like, this is what you need to know. And I can't bluntly just tell you because you're human with all of these other moving parts. And I don't know if you're ready to hear it and stuff like that. So it always becomes really fun. And on the load management portion of things, I know that you really emphasize like strength training, or cross training is really what you refer to it as a lot. Do you feel that it is hard for you to get people to buy in, like pole dancers to buy into strength training and know it's important? Or do you feel like that's becoming more of a popular, normal thing in the industry?
So I feel like it's becoming more popular, and I used to call it strength training. And then I was realizing that people have very strong emotions around that, like
around words.
Yeah. And like, they want to get stronger, but they don't want to lift weights. And they will if they understand why, but me going off just because for a while I was just like really hammering like pole dancers should lift weights. And that didn't go very well. But when I shifted it to pole dancers should be cross training, and your cross training should include strength training, and part of that strength training can include weightlifting, that kind of like roundabout way of describing it is landing a lot better. There's a lot of disconnect of like what actually is going to make me stronger. So a lot of pole dancers think that stretching, like static stretching, is gonna make them stronger, or they'll do a few like
just active. So silly to think about. Yes. To be honest. Like, what is the goal of stretching? Is not to. It's literally like, I think it drives me crazy because I talk a lot about stretching, and I probably talk about it more than I actually prescribe it. But I'm just so tired of people, one, like downplaying stretching, but also two, just like stretching isn't bad. It's just like not the answer to most of the things we're trying to use it as the answer.
Yes.
It's a tool, and it's just like, it has specific responses in the body and like adaptations that our body creates. So the whole like science behind movement and training and exercise is just like so lost. And then I feel like that's a little mini rant for from me, but I can see how people think that stretching might get them stronger, but also I'm just like, but if we really think about it, like, do you really think it will? And then I don't know, maybe the people that you work with are like, yeah, that makes sense. Actually, never mind.
Yeah, I feel like it takes a conversation to be like, okay, you're wanting to get stronger. Or a lot of times it's like, you've been stretching for months. Like, you've been having this ache and pain or this injury, depending upon what word they'll choose to use for it. And you've been stretching and like Googling different ways to stretch. And you're not feeling better. Like, at any point did it occur to you that like maybe stretching isn't the answer for what you have going on? Like, maybe. And a lot of people, the answer is no. Like, when we're having a conversation where I'm like, okay, you've done a lot of like passive stuff. Like, have you ever tried anything opposite. And they're like, no, why would I? Like, I've always just been told that I should stretch.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, well, here's a weight.
You're like, it's a whole new world. It's like here's a whole new world.
Like, yes.
Sneakily handing them a dumbbell. Like,
so I'm like, you're gonna pick this up. So, it's an interesting journey. And I would say most of the people that I work with, just because of my messaging of like, if you want to be strong, you need to train strength. And like, as women, we need to be loading our bodies. Like, I don't want to be the frail grandma that, can like barely do anything. And I will tell people that in our consults, to be like, do you want to be worried about falling and breaking your hip when you're old? And everyone is like, no, like that's like the last thing that I want. And I'm like, okay, well, you need to pick up a weight then. Like, you need to strengthen your bones to make this happen.
Do you ever get like pushback and them saying like, well, I do load my body with pull, like that's exercise as load, like isn't that enough? Like, do people think that, or are they more like, okay, like whatever? I feel like there would probably be a little bit of pushback there.
There definitely is pushback of like, well, I'm moving my body weight around, and depending upon where their skill level is, because like if they're truly flipping their body around and doing some like truly loading crazy things, then I'm more willing to be like, okay, like, yes, you do load your body in quite a few different positions, body weight, which is great. But then also like, you're still having this injury for a reason. So like, let's figure out what's going on. But then if they're more more a beginner, or they're just like not physically able to like truly put their body in a lot of different positions besides like upright or like laying on the floor, then we have to have a conversation of like, yes, you're moving and moving is great, but like, you're not able to get yourself into the positions that you would need to like truly load these joints the way that they need to be loaded in. So we're going to do that with a weight, not having you be like in, like a handstand to be able to load your position or your shoulders in an overhead position. Like, you can't get into that position. So we're going to pick a weight up and do it that way.
Regress kind of to progress, essentially, for that. Yeah. I feel like it's just important. Like, obviously doing pull is better than sitting on your couch being a couch potato. So like, yes, you're going to get benefits. You're going to be better off as you get older doing any movement. But when it comes to specific like bone density and things, like we just need a little bit more weight. And like, that is a conversation that I keep trying to remind people, like, regardless of your chosen exercise, like, number one, I want people moving in a way that they are like enjoying. Like, I want them to enjoy their movement. I want them to just exercise, because that is the most important thing beyond everything else.
Yes.
Then what you do to support said exercise matters. And we also just need to strength train also. Like, that's just an and also type of thing, which is cross training, which is what you're calling it. But I feel like what people don't understand or realize is that like true strength training needs to be a little bit heavier to load your bones for the reduction in like injuries down the road, but also reduction in injuries in their sport, and it will make them better in their sport or in their chosen activity. And like, injury mitigation with strength training and load is like giving you a buffer so that you have more capacity than what you're utilizing. Because if you're just doing the same type of pull movements or with the same body weight, you're going to reach a cap in how strong your body can get versus like, I know you know this, but I'm just saying, this is why we're so adamant about strength. It doesn't matter if it's pull or what it is. Like, the point is to give you a buffer in those tissues. And people with injuries usually have such a reduced capacity that not only is pull, like now pull is like more than what they have capacity wise. And so strength training is going to specifically bring that very specific area capacity up to what you need for pull. And then our goal is to get you to continue doing more, so you have a buffer, so it's less likely for that to happen again. Do you feel like that's a lot of what you do as well, or how you
so a lot of what I will tell people is like, we want our body weight to be light. We're going to throw our body weight around. That should not be our max effort. Like, we want that to be well within like the middle ground of our like strength and our tissues capacity. And if it's not, if throwing your body weight around is hitting that like ceiling of your tissues capacity in your training 7 days a week, like what do you expect to happen? Like, with peace and love, like, what do you expect to happen? Like, you can't be asking 100% of any part of your life every single day for years and years. There's no off season for pole. Like
I do that all the time. Like,
yeah.
What are you talking about?
Yes.
I just had this conversation with me earlier. He's like, Jen, you cannot be 100% in every aspect of your life at all times. And I'm like,
why
not?
Yes.
Yes, I can. Watch.
Yes.
I have those expectations, but so like, yeah, we educate, and like we also are learning the same lessons over and over again. And a lot of the lessons that I teach everybody is like I'm coming face to face with them often too,
yes,
which most of the time I'm sharing a message on here or to other people. It's like something that I need to be reminded of, and I'm thankful for Ryan for
yes
those. But yeah, we should not be at 100% at all times, always, forever. Like,
no,
your body is not going to like that. Something's going to give.
Yes. And that's, a lot of like something has to give eventually, whether it's like your sanity or your body, like, somewhere it can. So yeah, lots of conversations on that. And I found, because I've been doing this for over a year, that easing into like actual lifting weights tends to go better. So I will start people with more like banded body weight kind of things, low level weights. And then once they are like, oh, I'm starting to feel better, it's like, and now we load.
Success.
Yes.
They're motivated. Yep. And that's very true for a lot of people. Because do you feel like people that you work with, because they're mostly women, do they also struggle with being afraid of like becoming bulky or like putting on weight if they start to weight lift? Because I feel like that's probably really prominent in that industry.
Yes.
That already.
Yeah. The weight, definitely, like weight changes are a huge thing. And then bulkiness is something that is really interesting, because there's a lot of like pole dancer memes where it's like before pole, and then it's like a little skinny Barbie image, and then it's like after pole, and it's like Hulk arm, like Barbie with like Hulk arms. And like I look at it as like, fuck yes, like this like Barbie just got like really strong. But a lot of people will look at it as like, no, I'm getting too muscular. Or there's lots of like forums and questions of like I can't find shirts that fit anymore because my upper body's too bulky, or like sports bras are uncomfortable because it's like a really like you can't see my arms.
Because
yes,
yes, you have to pull yourself up in a bar. Like
yes,
like we can't have our cake and eat it too sometimes. I'm just like,
yes.
Like, is it annoying that I have to buy bigger shirts and bras? Yes, but like I get to do this thing that I love. So I would hands down prefer to do pull-ups every day, all day, the rest of my life, if it means I have to buy a bigger bra, because I don't know, I just love the ability to pull my chin up over a bar. Like if I can maintain that ability the rest of my life, like I'll be happy, and I'll willingly get rid of my adorable leather jacket that I had that doesn't stretch because my lats are too big.
Yes.
Was I sad about that? Yes, of course I was. But like, I just did a pull up and my tears were gone. So
yes, like, and we're great. Yeah.
And we've restored back to how I want to be anyway. So
yeah, I would say it's like a little bit of something that I battle with. Like you might, I don't know. And like, obviously if you don't want to get bulkier, like you don't have to by any means, but it might happen. It might happen. And then also like, what are you not going to be able to do because you don't have that like muscle strength, and like your muscles growing, like and getting stronger usually comes with some muscle growth. So like what do you want, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just like, what do you want? And like, if you want to be able to do some like pretty high level things, like you're going to have to get stronger. And part of that getting stronger is that you're going to have to build muscle. And part of building muscle is that like your arms are going to get bigger. Like, fact of life.
Yep. It's facts and like just non-emotional. This is the way it is, and we just can accept it, or we can not, or maybe we need to work more through it, and that's something to like pay attention to. But I think it's hard to remove emotions from things sometimes. And so I'm sure by the time people have reached you, because most of the time people are like, oh, I've been dealing with all these injuries or this stuff or whatever, that they're probably just like, okay, yeah, I mean, like at this point just tell me what I need to do, because I want to do the thing that I love. So and I'm sure that depends on where they are in their pole journey, on their milestones that you were talking about too. But I can see that being a problem. But I think it's also important to note that like, obviously practicing pull will get you better at pull, but there is going to likely be a point where you're going to reach a plateau or a capacity that you can't break through, because you have to sometimes work and make the parts work better or get them to be stronger to be better at the activity you want. And that's something that I talk a lot about with my clients and patients. It's just like, regardless of your chosen activity, like specific mobility training and strength training is always going to make that part work better so that you can utilize it better in your activity. And if we could get more people to understand that, maybe and value it, then it would be a lot easier. But I do feel like that's kind of a big part of our jobs.
I feel like a lot of artistic endeavors, so like whether it's ballet or gymnastics or pole dance or aerial, they for some reason think that they're like exempt from stuff. Well, they're like, well, I understand that like runners should strength train because it will help them run, but like our bodies are different because we're not doing traditional movements. So like traditional movements, like yes, it makes sense, but then for ours, because we're special little artistic athletes over here, we're different. And I am like, is your body different? Like, did you magically wake up and have like a different human body than the rest of the human bodies that like exist in the world?
Some of them might argue that, because I do feel like the hypermobile population trends more towards that because they're good at it. So like, I went into gymnastics because I don't really know why my mom signed me up for it, to be honest, but I'm glad she did. But I also am hypermobile, so I stuck with it longer because I was better at it. And I feel like, because I'm definitely more on the hypermobile scale. I have like the scale for Biden. Is that the correct?
I don't know how like it's BEIGHTON. Biden. Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. So
I don't think there's an R.
A scale. Yeah, I don't know. So anyways, but I definitely have those. And so I feel that in the hypermobile population, especially, I think this is facilitated by clinicians and some misinformation, but they're afraid of strength training, or they're told they shouldn't because it's not good for their bodies because their bodies are different. And so I do feel like maybe some of that population is kind of, that's like some of the reason that kind of bleeds over to them. Potentially. Happening.
I can see that having, because a lot of how people are taught is from their instructors. Like it's like their instructors were taught like that kind of like whatever you learn from people gets taught.
It's like similar in yoga. The yoga.
Yeah. Like waterfall down, where it's like, okay, that might have been true for your instructor's instructor, like for their own particular body, where like, yeah, they needed to take into consideration some like very specific things for their, unique body, but like that doesn't necessarily apply to you. And then also the bullshit messaging that comes around with like having a hypermobile body, where it like strength training is going to be harmful. Like,
hypermobile people. I did a whole like podcast episode on it. Like hypermobile people need strength training even more. It's just, it might need to look a little bit different, or it might need new education, because if you're hypermobile, you have typically lots of passive ranges of motion and a little bit more like ligamentous laxity. So you're going to likely rely more on your passive structures, and you can change that by just having a little more intention. Like those are the people who need a little bit more awareness and coaching usually. And this is majority of the population that I work with are women. More women tend to be more hypermobile. I tend to see more of the hypermobile population. And so I have to work with them to teach them, okay, we're not slamming down into the bottom of a squat just because you can, we're going to control it. And a lot of like the kin stretch stuff that I do is the exact same way. It's like absolute like learning how to control, and that stuff is a game changer for me. And I really wish we would stop giving this like fear mongering around these bodies that people are inhabiting, because they need it even more so, because they're more prone to injuries based off of the fact that they have like bodies that are kind of like driving a car that can go 180 miles an hour, but only having brakes up to like 120. So like you can get into positions, momentum can throw you into positions, or gravity can pull you into positions that you might not have control over. So you're going to rely on more of the passive structures, and just learning how to expose your body to those tissues, access those tissues, and dissipate forces with more strength can do so much for your body. And it's just interesting that it's unfortunate that the clinicians or coaches tend to perpetuate, no, don't strength train. Like, no, you do. You just might need to look a little different. And I think people have this idea, like you have said, they have their own idea of what strength training looks like. So they're like, strength training is bodybuilding or it's powerlifting. Like, it doesn't have to be either of those things. It can be like a mix of a lot of different things. And I think that most coaches like have their own little style of strength training. Strength training is a little bit of an art too.
Yes. Yeah. And that's been one. So like, I call them noodly humans where like, they're just like a floppy, or like Gumbies, a cooked noodle, Gumbies.
Yeah. I used to call myself Gumby when I was younger. So,
it like, they tend to have a harder time figuring out where their body is in space, right? So it's like, where are you moving from? How are you moving? All of that kind of thing. So if you are in that camp, it's a lot of me coaching is like, did you realize where your arm was going? Like, rewatch the video that you sent me and tell me where your arm went. Like, we wanted it to go straight up overhead, but where did it actually go? And having them, be able to like visually see what they're doing. Most of my hypermobile people, their like requirement is they have to work out in front of a mirror. Like, I'm like, I need you to watch what your body is doing because you have no ability to tell like what is happening.
Yeah, proprioception.
Yes,
like there, like, rely on vision a little bit and kind of match those maps in your brain.
Yes,
like a homunculus.
Yes, connect the dots. And people that are consistent with their stuff, there's two people that I'm thinking of that I'm working with right now. Like, their first couple times having them do, especially like they want to be able to do some like pretty dynamic like overhead movements, and I'm like, okay, if you're gonna find that position like while you're spinning and like kind of flipping yourself upside down, like you need to be able to like find it and stick that position. And if you can't with both feet on the ground, right side up, like you are going to have a really, really hard time with that, like upside down while spinning. So being able to see their progress of just like, I don't know, being able to like stack their shoulders under their wrists without like, oh, hey, where are we? Yeah. I'm like, yay. And neither one of them is lifting what I would consider to be heavyweight at all. Like, I think, well, the one's in Europe and I think she's at like 7 kilos. I don't know what that is in pounds. And the other one's at like 10 pounds of like, that's like a really good like weight for them to be able to control. Yeah.
I feel like that's also something that people struggle with, is realizing like strength training doesn't mean you're going to go pick up like a 300-pound barbell. Like, it literally is like meeting your body where you are, and it's finding the appropriate challenge for you here. Like, maybe the goal for them would be a little bit heavier down the road, because like, ultimately we do want to be able to lift more. But like, if it's a good challenge for you now, then you are taking the right steps and you're doing the right things. And sometimes people are like, well, I'm not lifting very heavy, so does it even matter? Like, am I even doing enough? It's like, yes, because is it challenging? Yes or no? Like, that's if it's challenging enough, which you could also make something challenging by just like throwing them on a physio ball and telling them to balance. So like different kind of challenge, but I think it's that's something that I see a lot, at least. So I don't know if you have the same type of comments from people, but one thing I wanted to ask you about the people that you work with, is there anything that you would like any clinicians, coaches, or non-pole dancers to know about pole?
Ooh, honestly, a lot. I'm like trying to, like where to start.
That's is going to be, because this could be a lot of different directions.
Yeah, so I feel like the first thing kind of circles back to where we started with, like, whatever your thoughts are about sex workers, like that needs to be just like put aside while you're working with people. And so not every pole dancer is a stripper. Not every stripper consider themselves to be a pole dancer. There's some intermix that happens between the two communities, but someone could come in and say, I'm a pole dancer, and just do it for fun. Or you could have somebody come in that like, this is how they make their money. They are coming to you for help. And if you're in a business, they are going to be paying you for your services. So like, stop judging them, like with peace and love, like just help them in. And most people won't know what they're asking their bodies to do. And so they will likely bring you videos, and taking the movement background that you have, just look at what they're doing with their different body parts. It tends to be a very, I would say more upper body involved in lower body, but depending upon their style. So just look at it like you would a baseball player or like any other sort of sport, or it's like yes, like
aren't we supposed to be good at like objectively looking at things, but like
yes,
there's such a stigma around all of that. So
yes, chaos.
I kind of knew you were going to say that, but I want to give the platform to be.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And then the other thing that I think comes up the most frequently is like the range of motions that we learn in school of like what is considered a normal range of motion. I don't know if they have a name, like the normative data, like the top end of that is likely going to be the low end of what a pole dancer needs. So if we're talking shoulder flexion, for an example, a lot of people will come in saying that like, oh, my doctor said I had like normal shoulder range of motion, and they'll have like 160 degrees of shoulder like flexion, and like 180, I would say, is like the minimum that we need, like a flexion. And so having a lot of people get frustrated, a lot of pole dancers that I talk to, they'll like, you know, I can touch my toes, so my doctor says that my like hip range of motion is normal, but like I need to be able to do the splits and I can't do the splits. So like, what's going on? And it's like, okay, well, if you are a pole dancer and you're just like barely able to touch your toes, like I'm concerned. Like that is not enough like motion for you for what you want to do. So looking at like what do you actually need for your sport, and you won't know that, and most pole dancers won't know the like actual numbers either. So assume that they need more. If they're coming into you and they're like, I feel restricted, assume that even though it's like quote unquote normal, it's not normal for them. So help them.
Yeah. That's, I say this often, regardless of even pole dancers, like majority of people who are active are going to need more than what the quote unquote norm is. And the norms that were provided, when I was in school and the norms they provided, I think they did that off of like the Gen Pop. So I'm like, do I really want to use those as like the norm? The Gen Pop is sedentary, like, or yes, like, so I have some thoughts about those norms, but like we need starting points. So I think that's important. And it's definitely something that is super common because a lot of providers will be like, oh yeah, you're normal. And it's like, I mean, your goal isn't necessarily to be normal. Your goal is to be a pole dancer. So like, yes, do I have enough for my activity? So that's probably something that's important. If you are a pole dancer listening to this, you probably need to find a provider who is willing and able to look at your sport. If they are not asking to see any sort of videos or anything, then you might want to find a different provider. And if they are not assessing you in the ranges of motion that like are necessary, which you might not know as a person who's not a provider, but if you feel like you're restricted and they're telling you your range of motion is normal, maybe find somebody else that you can work with, or maybe reach out to Emily.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I like forever, I'm just like, I will tell people when I'm doing the like initial consult, it's like, I'm not trying to talk shit about people, but like, motherfucker, I'm frustrated that like the rehab that you would give someone's grandma for a shoulder injury is not the rehab that a pole dancer should be doing. You might need to start them there if they're in a severe amount of pain, like, but that should literally be like, okay, we need to introduce some movement into your shoulder joint that's like pain-free. But we are literally, a lot of moves, I'm like holding my entire body weight up by one arm while kicking my legs to get somewhere else. So like it is like an end range body weight plus strength that I need. And if you are giving me a yellow band and having me do the stupid like external rotation exercise, I like it's not going to be enough. And then like it's no wonder why people, because like a lot of people are like, I did my rehab, like I did everything that they told me to do, but I'm still in pain. And I'm like, okay, what did your rehab include?
Well, the thickest TheraBand for internal.
Yeah. Yes.
The fingers up the wall. I don't know if you hear that one. Yeah. As soon as I hear fingers up the wall, I'm like, okay, that entire your rehab was like not. It was, you probably were seeing with 2 or 3 other patients. So yeah. And like, I've had some people that like, they'll start with fingers up the wall, and the banded external rotation is like the first like week that we're working together. And it's like, okay, like you can do those. End on that, and you're going to use all of these things. Like it might be enough to simulate some adaptations at first because you have such a low level of function in that shoulder from the pain, the injury you've been with. But like at some point, your rehab needs to look like what you're doing, or
yes.
movement, it needs to be like significantly progressed, because your pole dancers have very different goals than an 85-year-old. Like,
yes,
an 85-year-old has a whole different set of like needs that are way lower than the needs that the things that you're asking your shoulder to do. So
yes. And extrapolate that to any body part, because it's frustrating. It's frustrating to hear the wide range of, most people, I would say, tend to go to physical therapists when they are injured, because they don't like associate chiropractors with being able to do rehab, which that is a whole branch for another day.
In Ryan's podcast.
Yes. Yeah. Like, oh God. But yeah, like saying that like they went to physical therapy and they were massaged for the entire time, or they were given eSIM, yes, ultrasound. They were given like the most basic pec stretch that like could ever exist. And they're like, three sets of 10 for that, please. And then they feel like they failed. Like they walk away feeling like they did something wrong, because they're like, I went to my appointments. I showed up. I was given 12 appointments from my insurance company. I did everything that was asked of me. Like everything within my control, and I'm still here. And then to find out that was what they were doing. And I'm like, well, that was nothing. I'm like,
exactly.
That was a waste of time.
And I hate it too. And like, this isn't even to downplay the other clinicians who might be doing the best they can with their knowledge, their abilities, and all of the, like people they're seeing. It doesn't behoove them to refer out because they have a director down their neck telling them that they're not meeting quota, and if they don't meet quota, then the clinic shuts down, they don't have a job. Like I know that happens because I worked in a clinic that was kind of like that, and it's hard to do things and provide people with the care they deserve. And that's I believe why both of us probably operate outside of insurance offices, especially. There's like a whole different side for chiropractors too, but like it's just not to say that like all those clinicians are bad people. They probably are not. You may have even loved the physical therapist that you worked with when they were doing those things, but that doesn't mean that it was what you needed. Like you can love the therapist, have loved the rehab at first, but it just still like the facts are the facts. It wasn't what your shoulder needed, and it wasn't, or any body part. It just wasn't what you needed to do the things you want to do. So I think those are important.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's indicative of like our healthcare system in this country having some issues that like we need to address, when like that is what's becoming standard for, and I mean like I could say it for chiropractors too, like the standard chiropractic treatment is you go in, you get adjusted. Most of the time it's like, we're going to adjust your full spine regardless of what you have going on, because your insurance will cover that at a higher like return than if they just adjust the area that is painful. Physical therapist is like, how many units can I bill in the shortest amount of time to get the highest reimbursement? Like people are, at one point I feel like people are just trying to survive, and then on the other point it's like we've set up this system where the only people that really benefit are the insurance companies. Like it's not the patient that's benefiting at all.
Or the therapist.
And say, like the therapists are like, no one really spent this much time in school to put an eSIM pack on someone, like in a hot pack, like to have that be the entire like cap of their
have an hour
knowledge.
Of paperwork just to write down that you put a freaking eSIM pack on them. Like,
no.
And the amount of paperwork that is required when you actually do education and spend time with them is also a little bit more. So there's a lot of pushback in resistance to therapists treating people the way that they probably should or deserve to treat. And we went on this a lot in the podcast that I did, I think, when I went on your podcast. So we won't get into it too much, but I think the way that the messages that Emily ended with are really helpful. And I think it's always important to understand that, like, if you had that rehab in the past, you did it, it's done. Where are we moving on from now? And just keep trying, understand that a lot of that therapy is not ideal. If you've been through it, just know it was a learning process, and it was weeding out what worked for you and what didn't. And now it's time, or maybe it was what you needed at the time, but now it's time to kind of move on from there and keep searching and find a provider who will spend the extra time with you. And likely they're going to be outside of insurance. And so it's probably well worth the investment. I mean, we're biased and saying that, but like, my patients also will reiterate that to me. They're like, this is one of the best things that I spend my money on because I've learned so much. So like, we really have the time to educate you on things like, okay, load management, like you shouldn't just be doing pull classes 6 to 7 days a week out of nowhere. Like, you now learn how to introduce things to your body, and you're now all of a sudden strength training, which was something you weren't doing before. So there's just a lot of things that are happening when you invest in an actual clinician who can coach you. And it's pretty cool. I think it's cool.
Yeah. The reason that I bring it up is because I feel like I would want people to know that they didn't fail. Like, yes, if they went through the traditional model, like, it's not, at least in my experience, people don't walk away saying like, oh, my therapist failed me. It's I failed physical therapy. Like, that is,
and I think that's written from like orthopedic doctors will say that, like, patient failed physical therapy. Like, they will put that in their notes and they'll say that to you. I've heard that, I've seen the notes. So I know that is probably where some of that, I have a lot of beef with orthopedic surgeons.
Me too.
Not a rate we're getting into today because we do not have enough time, but I think it's really important to highlight that it's not necessarily their fault. And even if you were not compliant, like sometimes people will be like, not compliant, and you're like, I'm a terrible patient. Like, I've had people walk in my office and they're like, I didn't do my exercises, all this stuff. And it's like, maybe you didn't do them because you didn't, maybe they were painful and your therapist never asked you like, oh, okay, this needs to be changed. Let's find a different way of doing it. And they're like, oh, I didn't know that I shouldn't be in pain. Or all of a sudden now you know why you're doing it, what you should feel. Like, it's a lot more motivating when you know exactly what you're doing. You have somebody coaching you. You come back, and I will come back and I'll be like, okay, let's do your home exercise program. Like, the first session or the first few sessions, we review it over and over again, because I can't tell you how many times I go through cars with people and we just constantly need to coach. So like, it's a lot more motivating. So again, even if you weren't compliant, maybe it wasn't entirely your fault that you weren't compliant. Maybe you just need a little bit more understanding and somebody working with you.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why, like, my program's online with like some Zoom check-ins, but people will like upload videos so I can check their form. One of the, I think, selling points of it is like, I'm not going to give you that sheet of exercises that you get at physical therapy where you're like, fuck, I don't like this, or I don't remember if I'm doing it right, or like it's painful. Like, we are like every day going to be communicating with each other, like through the app that I use, of like, what are you feeling? What's going well? What's not going well? Like, you need to, tweak this a little bit. Yeah. And that is honestly like, one, why it costs so much. And then two, I think worth every single penny, because I've been through a lot of traditional physical therapy, and I would go in and they would be like, okay, show me this. And I would remember half of it. And I was like, well, this is what I've been doing for the past like week. So I just wasted the past week of my life, like, not doing it like as well as I could. So like, I'm not seeing the progress that I like could have if I would have like been able to like get some feedback in between. So yeah, it's really fun. It's a good time.
It is. I am glad that you have that option for both answers, because I just feel like it's such a need. So we have definitely talked a lot today. So I'm going to off the podcast now before we get into more rants. So thank you for sharing all of the information that you did with us today. Let everybody who's listening know where they can find you if they're interested in your program. Kind of give us all the details about that.
Yeah. So if you're in Boise, Idaho, come see me in person, because that would be cool. But if you're not, you can find me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is at dr.emilyrausch, and it's EMILYRAUSCH. And then my business that I do not ever post on its own Instagram, it has its own page, it just chills there, is Empowered Movement Chiropractic. So either one of those.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for chatting. It was good to talk with you again. We could probably talk for days, but
we could.
We're going to close out the podcast. So thanks for listening. Go give Dr. Emily a follow, and we'll chat with you in the next podcast.